You know that specific feeling when you walk into a meeting room, maybe it's a Monday morning, or maybe there's a crisis and the air is just thick.
Oh, absolutely.
Like the tension is so high you can practically paste it. Egos are clashing, and your fight or flight response is just screaming at you to turn around and walk right back out the door.
Yeah, the classic Sunday scaries, but on a random Tuesday afternoon, the room just feels totally pressurized.
Right. But then there's that one specific person who walks in. They don't slam the door. They don't, start shouting orders. They maybe just sit down, organize their notebook, give a little nod, and suddenly the pressure drops.
The air just clears.
Exactly. They fix the vibe before they've even tried to fix the problem. And that is exactly who we're talking about today on this deep dive.
The human shock absorber.
The human shock absorber. We are digging into the Max Energy ME80 personality assessment, and specifically, we're looking at the profile known as the WWFU, or, as it's translated, the soft heart connector.
Which is such a fascinating profile.
It really is. And looking at the source material, my first thought was just, this sounds lovely, but is it functional? In a cutthroat business world, is softness actually a survival skill? Or is it a liability?
Well, that's the central question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the ME80 report suggests that not only is it functional, it's actually a form of structural engineering for teams.
Structural engineering, I like that.
Yeah, it's the difference between a rigid building that just snaps in an earthquake, right? And a flexible one that sways but stays standing.
Oh, okay, I love that image. But before we really unpack the how and the why for you guys listening, let's orient ourselves. We're working off the Max Energy M80 system.
Right.
So give us the explain like I'm 5 on this system, because it's not your standard, are you introverted or extroverted kind of checklist.
No, it's not. It's quite different, actually.
Yeah.
Most personality tests out there look at behavior. They look at what you do. Are you loud? Are you organized? The ME80 looks at energy flow. It looks at why you do it.
Like the mechanics of it.
Exactly. Think of it like a car. Other tests describe the paint color, the leather seats, how fast it drives on the highway. The ME80 opens the hood and looks straight at the engine.
Oh, okay.
It asks, how does this person consume fuel? How do they process heat? Where does the exhaust go?
So we aren't looking at the paint job today. We are looking at the engine mechanics. And for the soft heart connector, the engine is running on a very specific type of fuel.
It is.
The headline in the report for their core identity is practically poetry. It says, penetrates distance with softness, building gentle bridges for wounded hearts.
It sets a really distinct tone right out of the gate. The core definition here is that they are a supporting personality.
But we have to be careful with that word, right? Supporting.
Very careful. Yeah, in this system, supporting doesn't mean subservient. It doesn't mean assistant. It means they are the load-bearing wall. They are the actual structure holding the roof up.
There's an analogy in the report about temperature that I found really helpful for this. It says they maintain a relationship temperature.
Right, the thermostat analogy.
Yeah, like think of the difference between a thermometer and a thermostat. A thermometer just reflects the environment. If the room is panicked, the thermometer shows panic.
If the room is angry, it spikes.
Exactly. But the soft heart connector is a thermostat. They have an internal setting, which is usually calm, stable, safe, and they actively work to bring the room down to their level. They don't fluctuate, they regulate.
Which is incredible, but it sounds exhausting, honestly. To be the regulator for everyone else's stress. To be the one metabolizing all the anger in the room.
It is exhausting, and that's actually the first big insight from the global view and their control mechanism that we need to hit. Outwardly, they look like they're doing nothing.
Just offering quiet, sustained companionship.
Right. They look totally chill, but inwardly, their engine is revving so hard, they are processing a massive amount of emotional data so that nobody else has to.
Which leads right into their philosophy on control. The report talks about their control mechanism being totally paradoxical.
Because usually when we think of a controller in business, we think of force, right? Do this, do that, meet this deadline.
The whole command and control model.
Yeah. But the soft heart connector uses what the report calls influence through gravity.
Gravity, not force.
Right. What does that actually look like in practice, though?
Well, it looks like leaving space. The source material really emphasizes that their core belief is that haste prevents success. So if you have a rebellious employee or even a teenager acting out.
A dominant leader might yell or set strict rules.
Exactly. They demand compliance. But the soft heart connector, they back off.
They back off, even in a crisis.
They create a vacuum of safety. They lower the pressure. Their philosophy is that if you stop pushing, the other person will eventually calm down and come back to the center entirely on their own.
That is a massive bet on human nature.
It really is. It assumes that people actually want to be good and productive as long as they feel safe enough to do so.
But that requires so much confidence to just sit there in the silence and wait for the other person to fix themselves.
They know where the finish line is, but they refuse to drag you across it. They'll literally just wait for you to walk there because they know if they drag you, you'll resent it. But if you walk there yourself, you've actually learned something. Okay, I want to pop the hood now. Let's get into the actual energy matrix the report describes.
Yeah.
This is the IP, IQ, and EQ breakdown, the technical engine room.
Yes, let's break it down.
So how does their brain actually process the world? The overarching theme for the WWFU is inward stability as the core.
Right.
Everything is directed inward.
Right. So let's walk through the sequence. Let's say something happens. Say they get a really rude email from a major client. How does their brain process it step by step?
Okay, step one.
Step one is the IP layer, the inner value layer. For them, this is defined as risk perception activation.
So it's like a radar system.
Exactly like a radar.
Yeah.
And it is always on. While a different personality type might look at that same rude email and see a challenge to be won or just an annoyance to swat away, the soft heart connector immediately scans for danger.
They're asking, is this safe? Right. Is the account at risk? Is the relationship damaged? Is my team going to be hurt by this? That's the spark that turns their engine on. Their deepest internal value system is activated by sensing what could go wrong.
Okay, so the radar pings danger. The alarm bell is ringing. What is step two?
Step two is the IQ layer, the emotional activation layer. This is labeled as risk and consequence judgment.
Consequence judgment.
Right. Now that they've spotted the risk via the IP layer, they don't just sit around feeling fear, they immediately run a simulation.
Like a chess computer?
Yes.
Yeah.
They play out all the scenarios. If I fire back a snarky reply, what happens? The client leaves. If I ignore it, they get madder. If I call them, maybe they yell.
They are calculating the human fallout of every possible action.
They aren't just reacting. They are judging the consequences.
That is a seriously heavy cognitive load. I mean, they're playing 4D chess with people's feelings before they've even had their morning coffee.
Constantly. Which brings us to the third step, the EQ layer, the decision calculation layer.
And this is about emotional expression and release, right?
Yes. This is the filter. This is how they decide to actually act. They've sensed the risk, calculated the fallout, and now they have to decide how much emotion to let out to maintain stability.
It's the dam.
It's the dam. And for the soft heart connector, the amount of emotion they let out is usually very little. They filter all that raw emotion into something totally palatable.
So they definitely don't scream back at the client.
Never. They absorb the shock.
Yeah.
Which brings us to the final piece, the manifestation layer. This is what we actually see on the outside.
The report defines this as energy operating inward, carrying, absorbing, integrating.
Exactly. To the outside observer, they just look calm, unflappable. But inside, they've just built a massive hydroelectric dam to hold back a flood.
They integrate the stress internally rather than projecting it out.
That is exactly why they are the shock absorber. The energy hits them, and it just stops. It doesn't bounce back onto the team.
That completely explains the duck on water analogy people always use for this type. Calm on the surface, paddling furiously underneath. Let's pivot to their inner traits. The deep analysis in the report highlights this concept of gentle support.
Right, and there's a golden rule attached to this trait. Haste prevents success.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here. In a fast-paced business environment, doesn't that drive people completely crazy? I mean, move fast and break things is basically the motto of the modern era. This sounds like move slow and cuddle things.
It can absolutely drive people crazy,
Yeah.
especially high-energy, fast-moving drivers. They look at the soft heart connector and think, why aren't you doing something? Why aren't you yelling? Where is the urgency?
Right, where's the fire?
But here is the counter-argument from the ME80 report. Speed breaks trust.
Speed breaks trust.
Yes. You can force compliance quickly. You can scare people into working late tonight. But you cannot force commitment. The soft heart connector is playing a much longer game. They focus on emotion first.
Emotion first, task second.
Always.
Yeah.
If you are stressed out, they aren't going to ask you for the spreadsheet. They're going to stabilize your emotions first. And they prefer doing this in one-on-one quiet spaces.
So no big public interventions.
No, they pull you aside, buy you a coffee, and just listen. They repair relationships through accumulated time and consistent behavior safety.
The report has this really great line about their ultimate goal. It says they want cooperation that travels far without collapse.
travels far without collapse. That is the key to their entire being. You can sprint fast, but if your team hates you, you might disintegrate at mile 2. The soft heart connector ensures you actually finish the marathon.
But as with every profile we discuss, there is a shadow. The sun shines bright, but it casts a shadow. So what is the blind spot for the WWFU?
The biggest issue is feedback delay.
This goes right back to that inward operating energy, doesn't it? The dam holding everything inside.
Exactly. Because they keep their care in the heart and process everything internally, they often just assume you know how they feel.
Oh, that's dangerous.
Very. They might have this deep, profound appreciation for your work. They might think you are literally the best employee they've ever managed, but they never actually say the words, good job.
That is a killer, especially if you are an employee who really needs immediate validation.
It creates what the report calls a psychological gap. You're sitting there at your desk thinking, my boss hates me. They haven't said a word to me in 3 weeks.
Meanwhile, the boss is thinking, I am so grateful for them. We have this beautiful, silent, deep understanding.
Yes, it's classic miscommunication. Their feedback pace just lags way behind reality.
I thought we had a vibe, but I actually just need a bonus.
Right. They are so unaccustomed to immediate, fervent, positive expression. And honestly, it gets even worse when there's conflict. The report mentions a trait called silent contraction.
Silent contraction, that sounds ominous.
It's the slow fade. When a soft heart connector is hurt or disappointed, they don't confront you. They hate conflict. So instead of fighting, they silently contract the distance.
They just withdraw.
Yeah, relationships can cool completely inaudibly.
So you don't even get the chance to fix it because you don't even know it's broken.
Precisely. They protect themselves by building a wall, not by firing a cannon. You just wake up one day and realize the warmth is entirely gone.
Which perfectly aligns with how the report describes their social relationships. It says their style is silent observation.
Reliable yet hard to read.
Exactly. They speak with measure, they never aggressively seek the limelight, they provide all this security, but because they digest everything internally, others really struggle to judge their inner state.
It gives them this stable yet distant quality socially. They observe first and decide later.
So knowing all this, knowing their superpowers, the stability, the shock absorption, and knowing their shadows, the silence, the withdrawal, where do we actually put these people? If I am a CEO building a team, where does the soft heart connector belong to get maximum business value?
Well, their core advantage is being a relationship stability regulator. Their management style is basically see the person first, discuss performance later.
So you definitely don't put them in a high-speed, aggressive sales role.
Definitely not. Not where rejection is constant and transactions are super quick. They will completely burn out trying to deeply bond with people who just want to buy a widget and leave.
Not the trading floor. Got it.
No. The report recommends areas like deep operations. Think customer success or major account deep service. Roles that require immense patience.
Roles where the relationship essentially is the product.
Exactly. If you have a massive VIP client, you don't want a closer handling them every day. You want a stabilizer. You want someone who makes that client feel heard and safe for the next 10 years.
The report also talks about organization cultivation, core team building, long-term talent cultivation.
Right. Humanistic leadership, it's culture governance. They change the vibe, which changes the behavior, which eventually changes the outcome.
And we touched on this earlier, but they are ideal coolers in a crisis.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
When the building is on fire and everyone is screaming, they settle the emotions so the problem can actually be unpacked. You cannot solve a crisis in panic mode. They turn off the panic mode.
They convert stiff demands into joint commitment, but just making people feel understood. It's powerful.
Very powerful.
I want to close with a concept from the end of the report that I found really touching. It talks about the ultimate proof of their success. How do you actually know if a soft heart connector is doing a good job?
This is the ultimate litmus test. The report says you know they're succeeding when team members who are in troughs.
Troughs meaning low points.
Right. People who are burned out, depressed, failing, going through a personal crisis, when those people voluntarily approach the soft heart connector.
That really says it all, doesn't it? When you are at your absolute lowest, you don't go to the smartest person in the room. You don't go to the loudest person. You go to the safest person.
You go to the person who can hold your weight without buckling. That is their true gift. They exchange softness for durability. When everything else shakes, the trust remains and the relationship still stands.
It's a really powerful reminder that in a world that is just obsessed with metrics and speed, there is still a massive premium on just being safe.
We constantly undervalue maintenance in our culture. But without it, the whole machine breaks. They are basically the maintenance crew for the human soul.
Well, that brings us to the end of this deep dive. We've been exploring the WWFU personality, the soft heart connector. It has definitely given me a lot to think about regarding how I handle stress in my own life.
If this sounded like you, or maybe like that one colleague who keeps your team sane, it is highly recommended to dig deeper into the source material.
For sure. Remember, this deep dive was based on the Max Energy ME80 Personality Assessment Report. If you want to understand the full system, or maybe check your own engine mechanics, you should visit their official website at www.maxenergylife.com.
Or you can search for them on Facebook.
Yes, search on Facebook for Max Energy, and for our bilingual listeners, that's Max Energy Onchi or Metanergy On. It really changes how you view the people around you, not just as behaviors, but as energy systems.
It really does.
So we'll leave you with this final thought to mull over. We've talked all about how the soft heart connector absorbs the stress of everyone around them, but what happens when the shock absorber runs out of capacity? Who is checking their pressure, and who absorbs the absorber? Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.